pay back the white people for what they've done to the people of color. Never once does he do it in his speech. Never once does he do that in the rest of any other speeches or any part of his movement. So the ones who are doing that today, and they truly are. I've even talked to people who are, I consider acquaintances and even friends, who have unfortunately been duped into the whole Black Lives Matter movement or something close to that, and have talked about that it needs to be the discrimination basically needs to be flipped and needs to be that's the only way that you can equal it out is to discriminate the other way. And if you don't think of that as being just crazy talk, then you really need to give yourself an introspective look and try to find out. Especially if you're a believer, if you're a follower of God, if you're a Christian believer, then you need to do a little bit of reading and kind of figure that out and see anywhere that you can justify discriminating against anyone, even white people. Not only does this kind of discrimination yet hurt another group of people, but it truly hurts everybody. Just the same way as back in the 1700s, 1800s, on into the 1900s, after post-slavery, but still when there was discrimination, that hurt everybody. No matter how much the bigoted half thought that that was the right thing to do, it hurt everyone. And by the way, if you're going to say that all white people are in one way or another racist, again, you couldn't be more wrong. And it's not hard to go back and find out and to see that it couldn't be more wrong. And again, here's another look at that. If all white people were racist and supported slavery, let's say supported the the discrimination against people of color, then we never would have had the Civil War. We never would have ended slavery, and we never would have ended the civil wrongs against people of color. You know why I know that and how I can prove that to you? Look who fought in the Civil War. Our country was so, yes, there were those who were racist and bigoted, but there were so many more who wanted to do what was right and knew that was wrong, that slavery was wrong, and then later on that even the discrimination was wrong, that we almost tore our country apart. We almost destroyed our country righting that wrong during the Civil War. And most of the people who fought were white. Most of the people who fought for freeing slaves and ending slavery were white. They fought, they died. There was 1 million people that died in the Civil War. When you count everybody, when you count the military casualties, the civilian casualties, and so on and so forth, it was close to 1 million people who died, and it almost ended our country. It weakened us badly, but it was worth doing because the sin of slavery was so grave and it needed to be ended. Same thing during the Civil Rights Movement. Of course, the biggest icons, most were people of color, but they were supported by so many of all races, many white, many Asian, many Hispanic, and supported by people both in politics and in business and in the arts and broadcast. And without all of that, it never would have happened. As eloquent as Dr. King was, without the support of the rest of the nation, it couldn't have happened. Our country had a huge sin, but our country, under God, was able to correct that. We're still not perfect. We're still far from it. Doesn't mean we're perfect. But we have moved past the institutionalized and the state-endorsed wrongs of discrimination and racism. I'm going to go ahead and play that big part of Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It was during the March on Washington back in 1963, on August 28th, which 1963 was the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. So there was a lot of significance that year and during that speech. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't in August; it was on January 1st, back in 1863. But it was still a lot of significance due to the 100th anniversary. And I just want to, I know that most of you out there have heard this before, but I'm going to ask that you will listen to this and listen to not only the eloquence, but listen to the it's a sincere desire of Dr. King's and many of those, he spoke for so many of the followers of him and the movement and so many who wanted to right this wrong. But that sincere desire for us to come together to end discrimination and not shift it from one to the other. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm checking my microphones and checking my equipment so that I can get this playing here. But without further ado, I give you Dr. King. I'll talk to you after this is done.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spirit. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
It's kind of hard to follow that one. I've heard that I don't know how many times, dozens of times, hundreds of times, some parts of it or as a whole, and it still causes my eyes to tear up. It still puts a lump in my throat because of the sincereness and because, I mean, Dr. King, if you were to judge by that speech and many of his others as well, there's so many of the things he did in his life. He was a patriotic American. He did not hold animus towards the United States of America. He held the United States of America accountable. But this was still in a day where there was a lot of hate, and he even mentions it in Alabama and Mississippi, the hate that was still there. But he didn't talk about wanting to destroy them and wanting to hurt them, but rather about wanting to join with them in getting rid of hate. It's just an amazing and profound message that he had. Now, he wasn't a perfect person. Dr. King was not perfect. You know, there's allegations out there of certain things. The two biggest are of infidelity and of communism. The communism, I think, is fairly easy to and fairly we can pretty much dismiss that. Yes, were there communists who were around him, who came around? Yes. And as a matter of fact, that's because they weren't the communists and the ones who were the socialists that wanted to promote that type of an ideology. They weren't interested in civil rights. They weren't interested in the rights of minorities, black people even. They were interested in pushing the socialist communist ideology. And that's still evident today. They're being much more open about it. But the matter of fact, the founders of Black Lives Matter, the foundation, are avowed socialists and communists. They make no bones about it. Now they won't admit that that's the sole reason that they want to do this, but they do admit that that is their ideology. But there was some of that element back in the day, but just because they were drawn to him, Dr. King, and drawn to the movement, doesn't mean that that Dr. King supported that type of ideology. There were also the infidelity, whether that's true or not. I don't claim to be a scholar when it comes to the whole movement and Dr. King himself. And so I don't know. I would like to think that maybe not, but even so, it doesn't take away from the righteousness of the movement and the idea and how he went about fighting against racism and fighting for civil liberties. Having said all that, to go back to my point just a minute ago, he was a truly patriotic American. He quoted so many patriotic songs and poems, and though he rightly so held America accountable during his time, and very bluntly and very poignantly, it didn't mean that he hated America. You cannot go and find anywhere in any of his speeches or writings where he hated America or where he hated white people or where he thought that we were a terrible nation. No, what he does do is he calls America on the, how does he put it, on the default of the promise that was in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. How did he say? It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given its colored people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. And this was not part of the speech that you just heard. Actually, that for some reason, that part is edited out of a lot of the ones that I tried to search in my brief search. I know it's not all of them, but for one reason or another, it wasn't in there. But I think that's an important part because he is quoting he quotes and he calls upon both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. He supports those and he calls on those as evidence of the injustice